चाहन्छु. I'd like to invite the editor-in-chief of Rest of World, Anup Kafle. उहाँलाई जोरदार तालीका साथ माथि मञ्चमा स्वागत गरिदिनु हुनका लागि म यहाँहरु सम्पूर्णलाई हार्दिक अनुरोध गर्न चाहन्छु. And we are delighted to have our panelists from all over the world who've come to share their thoughts, share their experiences in this session, which is Nepal in Multipolar Crosshairs. I'd like to invite Gao Liang, Deputy Director, Nepal Study Center at Sichuan University. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Liang onto the stage. I'd also like to invite Sneha Kumcha, Research Analyst at the South Asia Center, India. Thank you very much, madam, for joining us, requesting her to please take her seat as well. Also inviting Mr. Robert York, Director, Regional Affairs at Pacific Forum, USA. Thank you very much, Mr. York, for joining us and being a part of this panel discussion. उहाँ सँगसँगै मृगेन्द्र कार्कीजीलाई पनि हामी निम्त्याउन चाहन्छौँ. उहाँलाई पनि धेरै धन्यवाद. He is the Executive Director of Center for Nepal and Asian Studies. We're very delighted to have four very brilliant panelists for this particular session, our third session at our second day of Kantipur Conclave. And now, as the stage is set, I hand over the proceedings to our moderator, Mr. Kafle.
Good afternoon, everybody. Very exciting to be here. I know everybody's had a fantastic panel. I'm sure our advertisers, Extreme Energy, must be thrilled. It seemed like an extremely energetic panel, if you will. And it's going to be hard to keep up with those guys. Let's try not to fight. I know there is a lot we will probably disagree on, but I'm looking forward to this. And I also want to say it's an honor to be here as a moderator. I helped launch Kantipur Conclave about 7-8 years ago, the first Kantipur Conclave, so this is deeply moving for me as well. And it's great to be back in Nepal. The subject today is Nepal in multipolar crosshairs. And what we would like to focus on over the next 43 minutes or so is how can Kathmandu actually protect Nepal's sovereignty and interest while pursuing economic opportunities and security cooperation. Of course, we all agree that Nepal should engage with multiple powers, so it's not about whether or not it should engage with these powers, but it's about how. Right? What are the trade-offs between economic opportunity, sovereignty, and strategic autonomy? I'm excited to have a distinguished panel here. And let's start with a question for everybody. What has fundamentally changed in terms of Nepal's geopolitical position today compared to, let's say, 5 years ago? Mirgendaji, let's start with you.
Thank you, Anupji. I'm really honored having these panelists and this session, and I would like to thank you, Kantipur Publication. And definitely yesterday, I would like to recall how this entire panel was framed by Sadikshaji. She was just mentioning is the quest for change. And quest of change includes multiple, that sort of, domain. To a great extent, I don't know, these days, especially post-GNG movement, one term has been raised, that is cohesion. But I would like to delve myself, I would use that term, territorial philosophy of this territory. That talks utsukta, jigyasa, and prashna. Questions always asks answer with preoccupied or pre-opposition, that's the value. But I would like to frame today based on utsukta, not only from questions. Questions always demands answer. Answer already, who questions, there would be 50% answer with him or her. In that context, definitely this session very much engaged with center is Nepal, that is Nepal in multipolar crosshairs. It means, what is Nepal? How is Nepal? Why is Nepal? these sort of pertinent questions we need to ask ourselves. In that context, let me begin with this panelist. It doesn't mean that other multipolar actors are absent. Of course, we are here. We would like to respect, regard, and we need to engage with them too.
That's a very diplomatic response.
Yeah. Then another is that how we do define our Nepal and India relation. To a great extent, all prime ministers from Nepal and India, all academicians and diplomats, they have been utilizing certain vague and abstract terminologies. Our relation is infinite. We have this sort of, relation since time immemorial. So in this particular context, I would like to categorize Asia, Nepal-India relation would be at civilizational context, cultural context, and traditional context. Within that, I would like to use one term, Sanskrita. It's called Anuyai. Anuyai of this territory, shared that sort of territory. And that Anuyai's relation, there is no any that sort of differences between Nepal and India in terms of Anuyai. But when we do depart from Anuyai to citizen demands rights, responsibilities, politics. In that context, definitely we do have certain differences.
If I can pull you back a little bit, let's go through this thing. I want you to talk a little more specifically about what has changed in 5 years in terms of Nepal's foreign policy.
Okay. In that context, I would define these three countries like as we do have certain differences with India in terms of our relation, how we have shifted from Anuyai to citizen, yet we have to theorize it. That is the first question. And India is always attempting to pull us in terms of civilizational content and context. That is the first. And in terms of China, definitely China has appeared very greatly in the time of this Xi Jinping, when he appeared in power in 2012. Then he introduced OBOR and now BRI, and within BRI there are multiple variants of BRI. In that context, we do have like its connectivity, development, all these infrastructure, that's the position we have got. And in terms of United States, definitely United States has developed crafted certain global values in terms of democracy, human rights, individual freedom, all these things. So I think Nepal is in that crossroads of economic developments that sort of aspirant from China, and how we do define Nepal and India's that sort of relation from Anuyai to citizenship. And in that context, how we do define that freedom, liberty, or human rights in our I don't like to use that term, indigenous, decolonial. If I would use that decolonial and indigenous, then we would squeeze our knowledge in one point. So our sovereign knowledge based, how we do coordinate and cooperate with these American values. These are the certain things I have been observing.
Thank you. Gao, maybe I'll rephrase the question a little bit, and so we can move quicker. I'm just looking at the clock, and I know we have a lot to get to. In terms of China, how has BRI's evolution affected Chinese approach to Nepal? The evolution of BRI, let's say 5, 6, 7 years ago, right? What does high quality development actually mean in practice when it comes to Nepal?
Thank you for the question. BRI is a frequently mentioned topic when it comes to China-Nepal relations. We have been discussing these things since long back, but always when we were talking about this, the answer we get from the Nepalese side is that people are not satisfied with the development, since we have already into this compact for more than almost 10 years back in 2017. So for China side, we think Nepal as our close neighbor, considering this border and everything. And unfortunately is that part bordering with Nepal happened to be the least developed part of China. So for the Chinese government, they believe that the development and the prosperity of that part is somehow closely related to the prosperity and development of its outside external environment. So that is Nepal. So in that case, we can never achieve the stability and development in the Tibet side without the development of Nepal. So in that case, in this sense, I think it's very practical from the Chinese side that we sincerely want to promote BRI with Nepal and through connectivity, across the Himalayas. So in that way, not only Nepal can achieve development, but also this kind of development in Nepal can guarantee, a positive external environment for the development in Tibet, even the whole western part of China.
And we'll talk a little bit more about connectivity in our next round. Sneha, let me come to you. India's neighborhood first policy has obviously evolved, alongside Nepal's engagement with other countries. How does New Delhi actually view Nepal's engagement with other powers, China, US in particular?
Okay, thank you for the question. And also, firstly, thank you for this opportunity as well. So coming to your question, sir, so of course, a lot of times, India has also anxiously reacted when Nepal has sort of had some kind of engagement with China or with US or other. I mean, given that India sees South Asia has a natural sphere of influence, like some kind of anxiousness is justifiable given that, we have such a vast 1,700 kilometer open border with Nepal, right? So, there's a lot of labor mobility, there's a lot of Nepalese working in India and all of that. So there is a lot of anxious reaction that comes from India sometimes, but I think that has largely changed to a managed pragmatism now, because India is sort of more invested in sustained engagement through hydropower cooperation, power trade agreements, and rail and infrastructure connectivity, and many other things like that. And I think that it is the first question that also is that, compared to 5 years ago, I think currently Nepal and India's bilateral relations are really rooted in economics and institutional development. So I think, yeah. I think New Delhi has really understood that there are going to be a lot of players in South Asia, but it is how, and we also believe that Kathmandu will balance, and the idea is that India wants to be relevant and not dominant, and that really reflects India's strategic confidence.
That's really good. From dominance to relevance is quite a transition. We'll talk more about that. Rob,
yes.
Where does Nepal actually rank in the US priorities, particularly in the Indo-Pacific priorities? And how should Kathmandu reads Washington's attention on this matter at this stage?
To be perfectly honest, I do not think that the U.S. administration thinks about Nepal a great deal, and I think that it is not necessarily a characteristic I would limit to the current administration, but I do think that that would be certainly the case. If you look at the tariff rate that was imposed upon Nepal compared to its largest neighbor and compared to certain other countries in the U.S.'s priority hemisphere, the Americas, that lack of attention might actually be a positive thing. So look at it from that perspective. But in terms of what the current U.S. administration looks for, this current U.S. administration is trending more in the direction of self-interest. And there was a tendency amongst previous administrations to think of general stability and upholding international norms as being in America's long-term self-interest and therefore worth upholding. The current administration sees things in a more short-term, what's the immediate benefit for us perspective. And from that perspective, it's going to be a bit more of a challenge for a country of Nepal's size to stand out. I think in terms of engaging the current administration directly, there is a blueprint to follow, and that is appealing to the president's preferences, working with him to complement his status as a deal maker par excellence. Things like that are things that he certainly appreciates. I don't think Nepal is going to be in a position where it would interfere in the matters that the United States considers red lines. Most of those are in the American hemisphere anyway.
Thank you. Let's talk about connectivity. It's come up a number of times already, and I think that's one area where geopolitics directly meets economics, right? And Nepal needs infrastructure investment. Nepal needs actual roads and railways, but we also have three visions for connectivity, at least if you look at it from a Nepali perspective. China's BRI, which is pushing south of China, right? India's reluctance to see certain types of connections, especially when there are projects India dislikes. And then the US talk about connectivity, which sometimes seems more about preventing Chinese connectivity in Nepal. So, Mriganji, maybe we can start with you. What should Nepali decision makers, Nepali policymakers, what should they be weighing in when choosing between these competing offers? We need help from everybody. But what should they be considering when they're making these decisions?
Yeah, you pinpoint very concrete that's the issue. BRI, I would call Modi has been repeatedly claiming that heat, highways, internet ways, and transmission line that heat. And of course, MCC and Indo-Pacific, that sort of a strategy, which are colliding in Nepal. In that context, I have gone through 7 constitutions of Nepal, as well as 4 other legal texts which govern Nepal prior to the promulgation of our first constitution. It covers 1380 to 2015, that's the time period, when I tried to generate certain sort of idea. From that sort of process, this text, I have come up with one idea. We must have attentive sovereign approach we need to employ. Of course, powerful countries, they have been employing realism. That realism, we can't compete with them. And we can't allow them their single positionality in Nepali context. In that context, how we can respond that? This attentive sovereign approach, it's the confluence of Buddhism, Shaivism, and Mundhum, all our sovereign, our cultural, that's the background. So in that context, my point is, we should not allow anyone to be dominant here. But we need to engage, and if you are familiar with Buddha, he talks about active seeing. Active seeing is quite different than cognitive process. In cognitive process, powerful countries, they do talk about what they do feel from their position. But in active seeing, we do mute certain position, then respecting each other's that sort of interest, as well as sovereignty, we do develop certain ideas, which is called dependent origination. I think this dependent origination would be the frame of Nepal to tackle all these competing powers, I think.
Gao, let me come to you. What does Beijing actually expect from Nepal, right, when it comes to these connectivity projects? Is there any wiggle room for Kathmandu to negotiate, or where are the red lines?
I don't think there is red lines in this regard when it comes to connectivity. See, you just mentioned that somehow they're, because you know that in Nepal everything has to be put under the lens of geopolitics, and that's one of the reasons we are sitting here under this panel. But I think from the Chinese side, this BRI, the whole idea is very inclusive instead of being exclusive. These projects China is trying to promote with Nepal somehow is not just limited to Nepal, because from the Chinese side, the gradual design is not only to extend the connectivity with Nepal, but to the whole region. Let's say India, because for Chinese side, they don't have any problem with this kind of cooperation with India, with America in Nepal, because that will even enlarge our interest in this region. So the issue we are facing now is that, for example, like the two very advanced airports that Chinese companies had been constructing in Nepal. What's keeping it from...
Where there are no international flights.
Yeah, everybody knows the reason behind this. So what I'm trying to say is that there has to be also some sort of consensus among the major geopolitical players when it comes to the regional connectivity. So in that case, if my country and the other players in this region can reach that kind of consensus when it comes to connectivity, because this is purely economically driven projects. So if that consensus could be reached, it will be not only good for Nepal, but also for the gradual relations of the region. Yeah.
Yeah. Sneha, same question to you. What does New Delhi expect from Nepal? And I think the case of these airports are really good examples where we build these projects first, but somewhere India always figures out, right? Like it's in the picture because you have to fly the planes through the Indian airspace, and of course there is the Nepali policymakers who haven't figured out how to actually manage those relationships. But from a New Delhi standpoint, what does it expect?
Thank you. I'll answer the second question first. So regarding, of course, India has its own sensitivities regarding, airspace allowances and all of that. And I think, as Gao was just mentioning, I think the whole reason why this panel is sitting here today is to sort of bring about that consensus among the major players, right? So if we are really talking about uplifting and benefiting a country through economics or trade or connectivity, then there needs to be open communication, there needs to be transparency in terms of Nepal, the way it will handle major powers. So now coming to what are New Delhi's expectations from Nepal. First of all, I think investing in uplifting people-to-people and civilizational ties that we have, sort of spoken about at length and at breadth, right? So India and Nepal have obviously shared deep-rooted civilizational old cultural people-to-people ties, and all of these bonds are sort of like reinforced by shared Buddhist and Hindu heritage, exemplified by this Pashupatinath and Kashi Vishwanath and Janakpur and Ayodhya connections and stuff. And secondly, I think the other thing that New Delhi clearly expects is economic interdependence and connectivity. And we also know that India is Nepal's largest export destination. And it also receives an overwhelming 67.2% of its total exports. So, and also to highlight some of the facts, there are about 150 Indian ventures that are operating in Nepal, engaged in manufacturing, services, and others. So in terms of connectivity, we have worked on cross-border railway linkages, we've worked on other power transmission lines, the 2024 tripartite power agreement between Nepal, India, and Bangladesh. So connectivity is at the root of our bilateral relations as well. And most importantly, I think security and border stability is also an important factor in our relationship, because as I was mentioning, the open border is sort of an asset and a vulnerability for India. So India's core interest, of course, is that Nepal, in any sense, do not use it against it. Right, so Indian security agencies have repeatedly flagged the use of Nepal as a transit route for, either for fake currencies or any kind of crimes for that matter. And also that, cooperation has definitely reduced this risk. And after 2014 and 15, rise in regional militancy was also a cause of concern for New Delhi. So, and lastly, of course, New Delhi or India expects political stability and institutional continuity. I think frequent political churn in Kathmandu really puts an edge over long-term policies and commitment. So a functional governance, regardless of which party is in power, is something that India is ready to work with. And also, if Nepal could respect the past agreements and also commitments and show that continuation, then I think India is ready to work with any party.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Rob, how should Kathmandu think about these offers that come with contradictory geopolitical strings?
The position of the United States has been for the past decade or so that it does not necessarily encourage the kind of connectivity and infrastructure development that is offered by the People's Republic of China in particular, and the reasons for that have varied. In previous administrations, it was probably more a question of the PRC's influence and things that tend to come with infrastructure development. With the current administration, it's more a focus on PRC infrastructure development in other countries does not generate American jobs, does not bring money to America, essentially. So that is a consistent end result, I guess you could say, of U.S. policy on such matters, even if the motivating factors are different. But it's a fact of the matter that infrastructure development is needed, not only here, but throughout South Asia as a sub-region, Southeast Asia, Pacific Islands, many other places. There's a great need for infrastructure development, and I think there is a need for countries, not just the United States, but also players such as India, such as Japan, Australia, and so on, to recognize this and work together toward meeting the infrastructure needs of these places in order to promote long-term stability.
Rob, I want to stick with you for a moment. I think, as we were preparing for this panel, we were discussing this yesterday, and perhaps you can help us understand something, right? The Trump administration, earlier you said that Nepal doesn't feature prominently in terms of US's kind of interest and policy. Obviously, the Trump administration, its policy is America first, but what we're seeing right now around the world is maximum pressure on Venezuela, new Iran sanctions, potentially a war, and continued military presence in Gulf and the Middle East. For Nepal and future Nepali administration, whatever that is trying to read US intentions, how do you distinguish between America first and America everywhere? It seems like it changes on a whim, right? What does that actually mean for how seriously Kathmandu should take commitments versus capabilities?
Many countries, I think, especially the further one gets from America, many of them welcomed the change in government that took place because there was a sense that America was trending in a more realist direction. Yeah. And when they thought realism, they thought, okay, the United States government is not going to hold countries that do not have the same traditions, the same liberal democratic traditions to its standards. It's not going to try to remake the world in its image. But if you examine the actual thought behind realism, it's not that. It's not realistic thinking necessarily. It's the principle that great powers do what they can and smaller countries suffer what they must. And consequently, realism tends to mean whatever the great power wants it to mean. So that means the United States, does not offer open-ended support to Ukraine because it does not consider that conflict to be in its interest, but it does intervene in Venezuela because that's its hemisphere, that's its interest. It takes a position on Iran that, well, we're going to see what that is, I guess, in the coming weeks, whether it means an attempted repeat of the action in Venezuela or if it ends up not being that at all. But in terms of what it means, what that could mean could vary from week to week or even day to day.
I think that's fair. Thank you. Gao, I wanna come to you. We hear this thing called win-win cooperation a lot, particularly when we hear Chinese officials talk about relationship with Nepal. China champions non-interference and sovereignty. That's kind of baked into its international outlook. But also it has very clear expectations when it comes to Taiwan, when it comes to Tibet, when it comes to Xinjiang, right? We're seeing some of this kind of play out in Kathmandu as well in terms of what we refer to Tibet as in newspapers. That's drastically evolved over the last year. For Nepal, which obviously borders Tibet and hosts thousands of Tibetan refugees, where exactly is the line between respecting China's core interests and then maintaining Nepal's own sovereignty? Where's that line? Is there a line?
Let me answer the question from this angle. So first of all, last year we just celebrated the 75th anniversary of our bilateral relations. I believe that to the most extent, the bilateral relations had been gone so smoothly is because this relation is built based on mutual respect. So in that case, this non-interference of internal affairs from the Chinese side, that plays a very important role. And from the Nepalese side, to respect Chinese core interests, which you mentioned, like these issues. That is another reason that we had go through the past 75 years, right? So this is the gradual background. When it comes to these issues inside Nepal, based on, as far as I can understand, that there is already some sort of consensus among different political forces in Nepal. So in that case, no matter how different and how much they disagree with each other, but when it comes to these issues, I believe that they have this consensus and they will respect. So in this sense, there's no such difference on this. But on the other hand, there are still sometimes issues keep coming, case by case from time to time. But if you take a look at these cases, the pressure actually is not from Nepal itself or China itself. The pressure is from the external forces. Even these issues are created.
The external forces?
Are created and somehow because of the historical reasons, because of the colonialism or even the imperialism. So the pressures or even the red lines is somehow not created by China. So it's not China should be blamed. But I'm giving this background, I'm giving it here is not to blame anybody here, but to share my confidence with the Nepali friends is that I still believe, like I just mentioned, there is already a consensus. And we had played very well in the past 7.5 decades. So in this sense, these red lines will never be, and I have this confidence that these red lines will be carefully avoided from different forces in Nepal. Yeah.
Rob is smiling. Do you want to respond to that or no?
I was just going to say, not us.
Sneha, you talked about the civilizational ties, the historic ties, and I think that is something we've also heard from Indian officials for decades, right? And that's real, open borders, civilizational ties, people ties. So India's positioned itself as a natural partner for Nepal based on these historical ties. But whenever Nepal's engaged with China on connectivity or took positions, let's say on the constitutions in 2015, right? There were disagreements in terms of how Nepal was approaching its new constitution. India's also kind of been a bit heavy-handed, the fuel blockades, right? Public criticism, the foreign minister came to Kathmandu and there were reports about, his scathing kind of conversations with the political leaders. How does a small neighbor, a small country like Nepal build relationships with other powers without triggering a response like that from New Delhi? I know you've talked about how India's kind of evolved from dominance to relevance, and maybe what I'm describing is that time where India behaved like a big brother and a more dominant player. But I think this is the sentiment many Nepalis still share. So how can Nepal build relationships without triggering such responses?
Right. That's a really complicated question to answer. I don't know in how many ever minutes. This can go on for really long. But in short, I think India, again, as I was mentioning, that there are a lot of, it's given the geographical location of Nepal, India becomes extremely important for both the partners, like be it India or China. So I feel like, if Nepal wants to sort of engage with all the partners, it really has clearly some limits to it. Nepal definitely has room to maneuver among major powers because of its strategic location, as I was saying. And also it has shown diplomatic flexibility as well. And the fact that no single power wants instability in Kathmandu is common, right? So that is somewhere where I think major powers can probably coordinate. And also that, as I was saying, that Kathmandu has also shown this by engaging with China economically, like regardless of whatever reservations India has had, it has economically engaged with China and at the same time deepening practical, cooperation with India and also selectively engaging with US, Japan and other nations as well. So for me, I would say that maneuvering works when it is honestly like national interest driven and it's transparent. So in my opinion, I think realistically Nepal can definitely balance, but maybe it cannot afford to swing. That is the position that Nepal is. And I think New Delhi is also having a close watch regarding every aspect of it.
Yeah. Just a reminder to our audience, we have about 10 minutes left in the panel, and then we'll be taking questions from the audience. So I encourage you to use your QR code and ask any questions that you'd like to our panelists. Let's talk about the domestic angle a little bit. Mrigendraji, upcoming elections, that's what everybody wants to talk about. There are known quantities, and then there are some unknown quantities in this election, right? And Nepali politicians often, they've played external powers against each other for domestic advantage. We know this. Different parties, different leaders from different parties have different external patrons. When one party comes in power, they lean towards one country, one policy. As a matter of fact, it's always a matter of news here. What's the first country a prime minister will visit whenever they take an office, right? So how much does this kind of domestic fragmentation or swinging, right, like based on who's in power, limit Nepal's ability to actually pursue a more coherent and consistent foreign policy?
If you look at empirically our 7 constitutions, foreign policy has included only in 1990s constitution. Before that, we were practicing foreign policy quite differently. That is my first thing. And second, what sort of concern has been raised by our 2 neighbors, India and China? We need to be very careful, and we need to take care of their positions too. Nepal should not be the flight deck. Beijing can fly from Nepal to other countries, and other countries cannot fly landing Nepal to other countries. That must be the central concern of Nepali geopolitics, I think. And another thing, to a great extent, we need to base on constitutional foreign policy. If the constitutional foreign policy, we need to go through 2015 foreign policy, what has been, mentioned over there.
Well-
So in that context, definitely we need not to be focused on party-based foreign policy or leader-based foreign policy. We need to develop our own foreign policy. For that, I think Nepal is investing very little. We don't have think tank. We are receiving money from other country, and other countries are using that money not like as a niskama karma. The money is not coming from like as open-ended that sort of position. That's why we need to take care, and political parties, our government, we Nepali people should take care of that. And definitely, election is also, we need not to fragment in terms of our national interest, that is our foreign policy. To a great extent, it would be in risk for our territorial integrity, our sovereignty. So we must have that national consensus within political party. So I think post-GNG, that quest, we must have that sort of position. But government should invest ourselves what sort of position we need to develop, not by any other funding agency.
Thank you. And to our international panelists, we've talked a lot about what external powers want from Nepal, what Washington and Beijing and New Delhi expect. So let me flip the question. What does Nepal's success actually look like to each of you? You guys have been in IR for some time. Like, what does Nepal's foreign policy success look like? And I wanna couple that question with perhaps, if you were advising Nepal's next prime minister, what's one thing you would tell them not to do? Gao, you wanna go first?
I think I'm not in a position to lecture in anybody, but from the perspective of a scholar, I think just now we talked about a consensus. So another consensus should be reached between different political forces. That is to adhere to the national interest of the country instead of regional or even a party or any other sort of interest. I know there are differences among these forces, but as a country, as a political force which is going to run the government and run the country, I think national interest should come first. When it is forming its foreign policy. So in that sense, being neutral and being balanced, as it always have been trying to, that is the gradual direction. But when it comes to a case by case and each event, it's impossible and it's really difficult to maintain absolute neutral. So what I'm trying to say is that as long as the direction is towarding neutrality and balanced, that will be the right direction. And this kind of policy is not only a one-sided kind of play, because external players, especially these geopolitical players, are also very important when it comes to the foreign policy strategies of Nepal. Like I just mentioned, many of these issues and pressures are actually, very quite normal in any other country. But when it comes to the geopolitical lens, it becomes somehow sensitive, sometimes even disputive. So in that case, again, I would like to say that some sort of a consensus needs to be reached between these geopolitical players, because we used to define the Nepalese geopolitical environment through the relations between China and India, but actually what we are seeing now is more players in this game, and more importantly is that we used to say that some would believe that even U.S. and India may somehow on the same page when it comes to China in Nepal. But what we are observing recently is that this is not quite true, and we are observing some of the phenomena that even their two sides are somehow not working well. So in the coming future, this kind of scenario is going to be more obvious when India is somehow rising as a global power. So this kind of competition is not only between China and India, but also India and the United States, or even the other major players in this region.
Thank you. Thank you. Sneha, what do you think? Is there an opportunity for a reset post-elections? What do you think?
So absolutely, but to answer this question a little differently and to just step away a little bit from, like foreign policy heavy-handedness,
Yeah.
let's talk about, as you started talking about domestic, right? It is as important as foreign policy is. And I also feel the moment there is economic performance within Nepal, that is exactly when it creates space for the major players to, respect your decisions, right? So domestically, it is absolutely important for Nepal to do well. So first and foremost, I think stabilizing political stability before anything else should be the agenda for the government which is coming. And secondly, I think delivering on the economy. I landed here in Kathmandu yesterday, and since yesterday I've been talking to a lot of people, be it people who are managing the conference or other scholars and speakers, analysts, whoever are here, and Nepalese especially, not the international panelists. And everybody has the same opinion that they public trust is really thin right now, and truly public trust hinges on jobs, inflation control, service delivery, and infrastructure outcomes, right? So post-election government should really prioritize on economic recovery, labor protection, and investment clarity. And given the numbers, it's frightening, because I think the youth unemployment rate has reached around 22.7%, which is the highest in South Asia. And also, since 2012, financial year 2012 to 2024, the growth has averaged only between 4.3% annually in Nepal. So that's a long time for Nepal to sort of should have done something regarding its structural reforms. And now coming to the realm of foreign policy, of course, a stable Nepal is vital for regional security and connectivity, particularly for India, given we are such immediate neighbors. And and also India is interested that Nepal should also safeguard itself from undue external influence as well. So at the same time, strategic engagement with development partners can offer much needed, technical assistance and cooperation, and also understanding the reality of Nepal, which is a landlocked country, as we were talking about yesterday. Of course, it needs as much as help as it can get. Right, so I feel like, by embracing these reforms and balancing political stability with progressive change and strengthening institutions, Nepal can truly address its political and economic challenges. And if at all it can build an inclusive and forward-looking democracy, then forward-looking democracy that the youth is currently envisioning. I think you have to deliver on what the people are really asking for. I think the whole fiasco of Gen Z protests was something that nobody expected, right? So there is a clear-cut expectation from the people. So I think delivering domestically is much more important than...
Solve internal problems first.
Yes,
and then focus on outward-looking. So,
Thank
Rob,
you.
parting thoughts? Any advice for the next Prime Minister?
Invest in your young people. Send your technicians abroad to learn the best practices and techniques and technologies. Send promising young minds to learn best practices in terms of business, and send young people abroad to learn the best practices in terms of the civil service, so that they can implement the policies that will make the growth necessary happen. That has been the story of the Asian miracle economies of the post-war period. They've all done some form of that or another. And I would say the other part of that is don't blame external actors. The United States did not engineer the new Maidan protests in Ukraine, the pro-democracy protests in Hong Kong, or the protests that took place either here or in Bangladesh. We don't deserve the credit for that. At the same time, yes, look to those places, look to the future of your own country and invest in it.
As I was telling Rob and our panelists yesterday, I think this is a first time in the history of U.S. administration that if U.S. actually intervenes, it's not going to be a secret. You will see it on Donald Trump's Twitter feed, so you will know. Okay, we have a couple of questions from our audience. Let's see. Sorry? Let's get to the audience questions since we have. Gao, this one's for you from Raksha Baral. From a Chinese academic perspective, how does China view Nepal today, primarily as a development partner under regional connectivity initiatives or as a strategic space in shifting Asian power balance? As young Nepalis, what should we realistically expect from China's long-term engagement in Nepal? Maybe take the second part. As young Nepalis, what should we realistically expect from China's long-term engagement in Nepal? Short and sweet.
Yeah, thank you for the question. See, I have been, teaching in my university since more than 5 years. Many of our students are coming from South Asian countries. So, and I have many Nepali friends graduated from our institute, from our university. So, there's one student who graduated last year, and he came back in Nepal trying to get employed, but somehow it didn't work. So then again, he gets one chance in a Chinese company. So this company is trying to, explore a South Asian market. So somehow he gets, recruited. And immediately he was about to be sent to India to look after the market there, because the Chinese nationals, it's really difficult to get Indian visa. So he was the chosen one to go to India to look after all the things. So I'm giving this example is like that this development of the Chinese economy itself is a big opportunity, not only for Nepal, but also for the rest of the world. So coming to the ground, like last year I had, intensively traveled between Nepal and China, especially to the border side of our two countries. Once I was in Kirong, Rasua. Once I was in Taklakot, the Puran side of China. So I saw very prosperous, business there, and Nepali nationals working in that side, doing business in that side, or even having this sort of international marriage at that side. So to conclude, I'll make it very short. The development of China itself is a big opportunity for Nepali youth. So given closer engagement of Chinese, trade, investment, and other projects in Nepal, there will be more opportunities for Nepali youth in the future. I believe so. I strongly believe so.
Especially as U.S. kind of retreats and there's been visa bans now and visa restrictions. So I would imagine China wants to capitalize on opportunities like that.
Yes.
Mrigandaji, the next question's for you. How should Nepal strategically respond to some of the border and sovereignty disputes? Economic coercion, geopolitical pressure, interference concerns among India and China. This is from Abhimanyu Basal.
Yeah, maybe we have awarded, this is empirical fact, 1,000 PhD dissertation from Tribhuvan University, yet we haven't developed any perspectives and theory. So I would like to retrospect myself, then I am proposing this attentive sovereign approach. I think it goes to Kantipur's intellectual property rights. I gave this speech, my position Delhi a few weeks back, I was only speaking about active seeing from Buddhist perspectives. My position is that we need to, I think, power is shifting, neighborhood matters, silence can be very dangerous, overcommitment may risk us. What we faced in earlier political, that sort of, leaders through political leaders. So definitely as I discussed already within that my frame approach, dependent emergence, origination. Dependent origination, it means that bilateral, that sort of dialogue, that is the first. Second, we need not to put our bilateral issues in international forum. That would be quite dangerous. That is another thing. Then definitely we are economic being, as well as we need to explore the co-prosperity through regional, that sort of, cooperation.
Yeah.
So definitely within that, sometimes we are using certain sort of mysterious something. That's why our geopolitics, to a great extent, that's why I was requesting Nepal government a new prime minister who would be, he or she should invest a lot in Nepali, that sort of think tank, at least in security, diplomacy, and foreign policy. These are the core issues where we do stand, otherwise we would be in trouble.
Thank you. Next question for Sneha from Ramesh Paudyal, ex-MP. It's a good question. Obviously, India's historically dealt with the same crop of 5 or 6 leaders and 2 or 3 political parties. I think things are looking different, perhaps a little more interesting in the next elections. What would India's foreign policies look like towards Nepal after this election, especially in the scenario where these alternative forces, such as Rashtriya Swatantra Party, RSP, come to power?
Correct. I think first and foremost, India really respects Nepalese mandate. Whatever they choose, they're ready to work with, of course. But, I'm just forgetting. What was the first part of the question that you asked me?
It's really about, what would India's foreign policies look like if a party like RSP with a candidate like Balin, who's not really kind of publicly talked about his foreign policy views.
Okay.
How do you deal with someone like that?
That's true. That is very true. That India in the past has worked with. It was sort of a personalized diplomacy. Where India and Kathmandu worked sort of with particular leaders and particular political parties. But I think from the last couple of years, given the political churn that has happened in Kathmandu, I think that is completely reversed. And I think India has congratulated even when the interim government came to power, and we were the first respondents regarding the same. So I think what India truly is looking at after post elections is that regardless of which power comes to power, if they could engage in economic partnership, I think that is what truly matters, and continuity in policy would be the best.
Thank you. Rob, the next question is for you. This is from Arpan Upadhyay. Traditionally, the United States was often seen as viewing Nepal largely through the lens of India. However, in recent years, the US appears to be engaging and observing Nepal more directly. How do you interpret this shift? One, is that true? How do you interpret this shift, and what does it mean for Nepal's strategic space in an increasingly multipolar world?
Yeah, I'm not really sure if I see it the same way as the person asking the question. I do know that the United States regards South Asia much more than it did, and it does consider India especially to be a very valuable partner by and large. The disagreements between the president and the Indian government over the past year notwithstanding. So I suppose that the greater shift in attention towards South Asia comes with a greater focus on the countries in the neighborhood, so to speak, Nepal included. So there's definitely going to be a space for Nepal to, I'd say, capitalize on that increased attention, which is going to happen. I mean, foreign policy, this administration is especially top-down when it comes to setting foreign policy, but no foreign policy is set alone, and there are definitely people around this president who are going to view India and South Asia as especially critical theaters. But I would advise not to necessarily put all of the eggs in the US basket. There's definitely going to be a shift, this new age of multilateralism that we are in and strategic autonomy that we are in. There's going to be much more space for countries like Nepal to bandwagon with other countries, middle powers, countries of similar size, and I'd say invest in diversification. That's a good piece of advice for any country.
Great, thank you so much. Gao, Sneha, Rob, Mrigandaji, thank you so much for your time, and for our international panelists, thank you for flying all this way. This was a very exciting panel. I learned a lot, and you guys are welcome back to Kathmandu anytime. I think we're the only panel that's keeping everybody from lunch, so thank you.
Sadly, yes, we will have to conclude this panel, but thank you very much to our fantastic moderator as well for wrapping up and for bringing out these crucial points beautifully. Definitely a big round of applause. उहाँलाई एकपटक जोरदार ताली हाम्रा सम्पूर्ण प्यानलिस्टका लागि सँगसँगै मोडरेटरज्यूका लागि पनि हामी धेरै धेरै धन्यवाद ज्ञापन गर्न चाहन्छौँ। यस सँगसँगै हाम्रो तेस्रो प्यानलको पनि अन्त्य भएको छ, but if I can ask Sneha to come back for a quick group photograph, which will conclude this third session, which was on the theme Nepal in Multipolar Crosshairs. With this, we've come exactly to the midpoint, ladies and gentlemen. अब lunch break पश्चात हाम्रो बाँकी तीनवटा सेसन तर्फ हामी अगाडि बढ्नेछौँ। 1 घण्टाको lunch break रहेको छ। यसो घडी हेर्दा झन्डै 2 बजिसकेको छ। यहाँहरू सबैजना 2:50 सम्म चाहिँ हल भित्र आइदिनुहुन्छ कि भन्ने आग्रह पनि म गर्न चाहन्छु। 50 मिनेट भित्रमा लन्च सकाएर हल भित्र आइदिनुहुन्छ भने चाहिँ हामी हाम्रो चौथो सेसन आजको लागि सुरु गर्ने थियौँ, which would be New Voices of Republic. गणतन्त्रका नयाँ आवाजहरू चाहिँ हामी लन्च ब्रेक पश्चात सुन्नेछौँ। अहिलेको लागि please do enjoy lunch and join us in exactly an hour. Thank you very much.
कुन पुस्ता, हरेक पुस्ताको प्रश्न, भोलिको समाधान, खोज सही उत्तरको। कस्तो सोच, रूपान्तरणको बाटो, नयाँ परिभाषाको खोजी, खोज सही उत्तरको। कसको नेतृत्व, सामूहिक सहभागिता, निर्णयमा सबैको स्वर, खोज सही उत्तरको। Kantipur Conclave, the national dialogue, परिवर्तनको प्रश्न।